This Week in Connecticut with Dennis House starts now.
Welcome to This Week in Connecticut. Greetings, everyone. I'm Dennis House. Election 2026. Former New Britain Mayor Erin Stewart is now a candidate for governor. Stewart is with us today to talk about her Republican opponent, Ryan Fazio, Governor Lamont, President Trump, and what she would do if elected. Do you want to run for office? It is not as hard as you might think. The vice chair of the Connecticut Democratic Party, Jimmy Tickey, wrote a book, A Guide to Running, and he joins me to discuss. Plus, an amazing piece of Connecticut history. Bob Wilson takes us inside a Wethersfield church that dates back to the time when we were a British colony, and one of our first presidents took a climb to the top of that steeple. Also, after 100 years, a landmark restaurant is closing today. First up this week, the race for governor, which is now in full swing as Governor Lamont seeks re-election to a third term. We've sat down with all of the candidates, and today we talked to the newest candidate in the race, former New Britain Mayor Erin Stewart. Mayor Stewart, thanks so much for being with us here.
Thank you so much. So exciting to be back. It's been a while.
Last time we spoke, you were exploring a run. You made that decision to jump into the race. What led to that decision?
Yeah, so I announced that I was exploring, almost a year ago at this point, and then I wanted to really get through my term as mayor. I was finished being mayor of the city of New Britain in November. I wanted to make sure I made it through, closed everything out the right way before we jumped into this next arena.
Was there ever a point along the way that you said, maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe I shouldn't run?
Yeah.
Did you have doubts?
I think so. I think it was a lot of, emotion and a lot of consideration, especially discussions with my family and my husband throughout the way. I mean, I know that I have a passion for public service and I know I want to serve, but I also know what it's going to take to do this for the next year. And so there was definitely some times where we weren't 100% sure.
So one Republican dropped out of the race, Jen Tooker. There's still one other one in, Ryan Fazio. What makes you more qualified to be governor than Ryan Fazio?
Yeah, I think it's just my experience and where I come from and who I am. I think that, I've been saying for a while now that it's time for something different in politics. I come from a different world. I come from a different part of the state. I'm a blue-collar, working-class raised, woman. There are very big differences between him and I, especially with my management experience as mayor of a city in Connecticut, where we know that it's outnumbered Democrat to Republican a lot, and I won that pretty handily 6 times. So I think that all those experiences are what make me more qualified than he, but I also think that I appeal to a broader base of voters in the state.
The last governor from New Britain was Tom Meskel, elected 55 years ago, 1970, I believe.
Yeah.
He was the former mayor of New Britain.
He was the mayor of New Britain, yes.
Who went on to Congress and then, of course, became the governor. As you look at other Republican governors in the history of our state, I know that you knew Governor Rell.
Yep.
What kind of advice did she give you?
Oh, Governor Rell, she was one of my first bosses in politics. She hired me when I was out of college at CCSU. I was very grateful to be able to work for her. She always told me to stay true to myself, to be who I am and not waver in that people will like you for who you are and not to feel that you have to pretend to be someone else.
How do you persuade the voters out there that it is time for a change and you're asking them essentially to fire their current governor, Governor Lamont, and entrust the Republican Party, which doesn't have any congressional seats or any constitutional officers, doesn't control either house in the legislature, to take over the governorship?
Nothing. It's one party rule. And that's what I'm saying. I want to bring balance to politics. I want to bring something different. I can convince people, I think, pretty easily with just the situation that people are going through in the state of Connecticut with the highest cost of living and taxes that are through the roof, and people are struggling to afford pretty much everything. And I want to bring a very different mindset of reducing the size of government and cutting taxes across the board and making it easier for families to survive. I know it, I live it myself, and I've led a community that's been dealing with that for a while now.
Which of Lamont's policies do you think are bad for Connecticut?
Well, I look at the housing bill that was just passed that I think is bad for the state as the most recent example, because I think that local control is very important when it comes to zoning and housing development decisions. I'm not a fan of taking away control over what we think is best for our communities, and I do think that bill does that. But another thing that I think is wrong with that policy is that it doesn't look at improving the housing stock that we already have. In the city that I led, we had a lot of dilapidated housing stock with owner-occupied units that they could use an opportunity to get a boost up to make improvements to what they already own. And I don't see that. There was no communication with landlords or already existing property owners. And I think that's definitely one great big policy that could change.
If you look back at his years in office, is there one big mistake you believe he made?
If there's one big mistake, I think it's the lack of communication with the average working day family across Connecticut. I don't think that, he's relatable. And I don't think that he knows what working class Connecticut is going through, which is a majority of us. And that's what fuels my fire to run. Because I know that our families are struggling and our moms are struggling to get their kids to daycare and to pay for it every day. And especially kids with, families with multiple kids in the household struggling to pay groceries. I get it. I see it, I feel it. I think that he's disconnected from that, not from one way or another. It's just who he is, and the class that he comes from is different than a lot of the rest of us.
When you see the polls showing him ahead,
yeah.
and you see the other polls say that people are satisfied with the direction of the state,
yeah.
Well, how do you respond to that?
I think that Ned Lamont hasn't been given a good challenge before, and I think that I will be the first pretty firm challenge that he's had. So I am very interested to see how people respond to that. He's ahead in the polls, for his primary, which was what just recently came out, and I think that's to be expected. But I'm looking to give him a good run for his money.
You see he hasn't had a challenge. Let's talk about his challenger the last two times, which was Bob Stefanowski. What did you learn from those failed campaigns?
I learned a lot from that. What I learned is that cities are incredibly important here, that relating to blue-collar Connecticut is very important here, and that bringing forth a message that people can relate to, that they feel, is very important. And I also think that we learned that communicating with people, finding them where they are, and going to them where they are in our cities and in our towns will be important too. So I'm starting a listening tour and starting a meet and greet tour. We're starting off in Old Saybrook next week and going to be heading off into East Congressional District to meet free events to hear what people have to say and hear their take on why they want change.
When people hear the word Republican, they think Donald Trump. He is the head of the Republican Party across the whole nation right now.
Sure.
You've said in the past that you wouldn't mind if he came and campaigned for you here. Do you still feel that way, that you'd want him here?
I mean, listen.
Would he be helpful?
I don't think so. However, but I'm not going to say no if the sitting president wants to come in and help me out, of course. But I've also been very clear, that I support some of his policies, but I don't necessarily support his delivery. I think a lot of people feel that way. But I've been to the White House. I've had the honor of being in the West Wing. I've also had the honor of not just meeting President Trump, but meeting President Obama, too, as a mayor. These are great honors for anybody in politics to engage with the sitting president of the United States. And I have deep respect for that. And while, I think that a lot of other people, I think most people have respect for those that hold office as well.
As you know, the Democrats in our state, including the governor, Senator Murphy, Senator Blumenthal, have said that the Trump policies are bad for Connecticut. Which Trump policies, in your judgment, are good for Connecticut and have actually benefited people here?
I'm going to talk to you about the one that was closest to me in my time as mayor, and that was the Opportunity Zone legislation. That was what led me to go down to Washington the first time. I played a role in actually getting that legislation changed so that cities like New Britain could benefit from it. Basically, what it does is it allows developers to use their capital gains to reinvest in poorer urban centers across the nation. The city of New Britain was able to utilize this legislation to redevelop multiple apartment buildings in our downtown area and add new housing opportunities and affordable housing opportunities for people because of it. I think that's been a great benefit and something that a lot of our communities could use too.
Do you think the people across the street have a good opinion of New Britain across our state?
I would hope so. I think that it certainly has changed in the last 12 years that I've been mayor. There's no doubt about it. I think that if it was one thing that I was able to do in my time there, it was make people look at New Britain differently than what they had before, and I feel very strongly in that.
So if someone said to you, what did you do for New Britain that you can do for the rest of the state, what would that be?
As simple as it is, people now have pride in the city of New Britain that they didn't have before. And everywhere you go, people don't have pride in the state of Connecticut. They don't feel good about what's happening here. I want to give them something to feel good about and something to smile about again. And I know that sounds so trivial, but it makes a huge difference. It did in my city, and I hope to do that for the state.
It's unusual when we look back at history in Connecticut that there are only 2 Republicans running for governor right now. There used to be a field of 5 or 7 in elections past for a while in the primary process. Do you hear of anyone else perhaps jumping into the race? We know the former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCoy, may do it.
Maybe. I think she might be the only other one, but we know how this works. We've been around for a little while. We know that last minute in the convention, there may be somebody that pops up out of nowhere, but I don't think I've really heard of anything.
Do you have any relationship at all with Ryan Fazio? Have you spoken to him at all about this?
I don't, no.
Have you met him?
I've met him once or twice, but we have no real relationship. We've talked a couple of times about energy things, but that's kind of it.
So likely meet in a debate for the first time. Well, at least talk to, at length in a debate. All right, Erin Stewart, the former mayor of New Britain, now a candidate for governor of Connecticut. Best of luck.
Finally say it.
Yes. We'll see you again.
Thank you,
Thanks for coming on.
Dennis.
And coming up, when we come back, a guide to running for office. There's a new book, and the author joins us after the break.